November 29th, or in semi-Hebrew, Kaftet November, is one of the most famous dates in the annals of Zionism. Of course, in 1947, this was the date of UN Resolution 181, the Partition Resolution, which established the basis for the State of Israel. But in 2023, November 29th, is also the day Henry Alfred Kissinger died, age 100. A few years earlier, in the late summer of 2012, a small team of Israeli documentary makers, producer-director Amit Goen, cinematographer Adam Vardi, and myself, the interviewer, went to see Kissinger at his Manhattan office. The topic, the Yom Kippur War of 1973. This is a unique document in which Dr. Kissinger is revealing his feelings and some data regarding the war of 1973, in which, as he said, the United States, President Nixon, and, not least, Kissinger himself, saved Israel. The interview was arranged through the good offices of my partner here at Pine&Oak, former Consul General in New York, Alon Pinkas, for which, of course, we are grateful. So here it is, warts and all, the very raw material of the Kissinger interview on the Yom Kippur War.
Yeah, and you're going to carry it out.
Well, hopefully, yes, of course we will. We thank you for your cooperation, because this is an international production, not only Israeli, it will be seen elsewhere, and there is a lot of interest, of course, in your own contribution.
Yeah, but some of the questions are classically Israeli.
Really? Okay.
But you go ahead, we have half an hour.
Okay. You are the only survivor, unfortunately, of this picture. George Washington included, if that's him.
Yeah, that's true.
This was taken on March 1st, 73, when Rabin was leaving. This was actually his birthday, and Simcha was coming in as Golda's political advisor, but he was, of course, the next ambassador.
Yes, of course. And no, well, they were both very good friends of mine, and Rabin was an especially good friend. And I went to his grave when I was in Israel.
Right now with Shimon?
Yeah, as I always do. And
it was a pity. Later on, if you would care to characterize people here in the picture.
I don't know.
You don't? No, in the context of their contribution to 73.
You see, the trouble with it, what you're doing is none of us have any idea what your commentary is. Mm-hmm. And you can use what we say, even with my limitation, anyway to make a point that you want to make.
This is not
know that is
This
true.
is not our intention at all.
And yeah, but that's what they always say. And in 9 cases out of 10, I have had very bad experiences.
This would be the 10th case.
Well,
the 10th out of 10.
It's important to do something objective. But, for example, you could leave room for the possibility that your government acted in good faith at various stages.
Fine. No. I'm not trying to put words in anyone's mouth.
I mean, just the vague possibility that occasionally an Israeli government tries to act in the Israeli interest.
Okay, fine.
I don't want to press you into...
So is it okay if I put a little bit of powder on?
Sure. Not to speak of the American government.
No, I understand.
But I don't expect...
Well, at the time, in looking at the record, at the time, you had some misgivings regarding the policies of the Israeli government, but that's all gone. And
What year?
73, 74, then the reassessment. But
A lot of things were happening,
right, and of course this
and
was
a
not
lot of context. And there was the slight problem that we saved you in 73, right? So you can't very well argue that we were hard on Israel.
No, that's exactly my point. That you yourself was the grandmaster of diplomacy here. You and Sadat were the strategists, while other actors were at most tacticians. But why don't we go over there?
Well, you go ahead.
Going back to 1970.
Just straighten your tie a little bit. At the top. Sorry. You need to. Yeah, no, you can't. So this way, yeah. So there you go. That's it. Almost there. That's good. That's it. This way.
By the way, in the cables that Simcha and Golda sent to each other, you had a code name, Naftali. Were you aware of it?
No.
But is Alfred?
I don't even know what it means.
No, it's a.
No, I know it's a Jewish name.
You're right. Well,
But has it any special significance?
maybe some Alfreds, when they emigrated to Israel, called themselves Naftali. For some reason, they chose this name.
But my name wasn't Alfred.
Henry Alfred.
Yeah, but Alfred was never used.
But did you have any Hebrew name?
Not that I...
No.
Yes, I did, but it wasn't Naphtali. But I forgot what it was.
So in any event, they used Naftali as a code word. Going back to 1973, what is the biggest impression? What made the most impact on you, which you still remember 40 years later? This entire year or the war itself, what was the most impressionable event?
Well, for America, 1973 was the time the Vietnam War ended, and the peace agreement with Vietnam was signed. It was the beginning of the Watergate crisis, and only towards the end of it, of course, the Arab-Israeli War was the singular event. But for those of us who conducted foreign policy, we had a Vietnamese problem, we had a Chinese challenge, we had a Cold War with Russia, and then, on top of this, the Arab-Israeli War at a moment when the president was getting under the beginning of impeachment proceedings.
So you had so much on your plate. As you say, in March, the Vietnamese War was ending with the POWs coming home. Then you declared that this was going to be the year of Europe, the Nixon administration,
Yes.
Sovietist Europe. You had the Chinese opening and the detente with the Soviets. Was that the reason you decided to put off any diplomatic initiative until after the elections in Israel?
No, and we had the Watergate crisis also, which put limitations on presidential maneuverability. But we were probably also affected by the realization that it was better to wait with a peace initiative until after the Israeli election. But we took preliminary steps towards a peace initiative in 2 meetings with the Egyptian National Security Advisor. It's crucial to remember that that we had no diplomatic relations or contact with any of the Arab states. So can we stop a minute? I would like to get a recording of my answers.
Fine.
Sure.
Can you ask one of my secretaries to come in?
Dr. Kissinger, do you have a cell phone in your pocket?
Yeah, I'll take it off.
Because it's beeping. Could you turn it off? Or you want us to call somebody specific?
Louise, I want to record what I'm saying.
Maybe we can provide Dr. Kissinger with.
No, I think he wants it right now
Yeah.
to have it on him, right? Simultaneously.
Oh,
This is his phone.
you want to record on your phone?
No,
No.
I won't.
You want me to
It beeps when it's in my pocket.
Okay.
It interferes. But I want a recording so that we can check what they're using.
Okay, it's recording.
Will this do it?
Yeah.
Let's put it
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Let's put it here.
Tara, if you want to put another phone here, fine. Let's just do it.
All right. Okay. Is this phone
You
turned
think
off
this
yet?
will be okay?
Is it turned off? Is it turned off the network?
No, she'll give it back to me. You don't need to say.
No,
No.
Will
it's
it-
not-
will
it's
it
not
ring?
what's recording.
You just don't want it ringing in the middle of your.
Oh,
It's still a telephone, so I was asking whether it was connected to the network.
I don't know.
Very good question.
I have no idea.
You can put it on airplane.
Tara, were you going to put a phone here?
Yeah, I was gonna-
Put it down,
I was gonna put it back up, just in case.
and we'll have two.
We love recordings.
I see.
So you were saying that you had no diplomatic contacts with any of the confrontation states. Obviously, with Jordan you did have.
Yes. Well, we had the contact with the National Security Advisor of Egypt, but we had no diplomatic representation in Egypt nor in Syria. No, so far as I remember, any contact whatever with Syria.
You met with Hafiz Ismail, the National Security Advisor, in Don Candle's estate. The Pepsi.
I forget where, and some private residence which we arranged.
And you got the notion from him that a certain formula can be worked on of sovereignty versus security in return for security, that something might be achieved?
But the basic position of Egypt at that moment was in effect returned by Israel to the 67 borders, and then there would be some security arrangements. I don't believe the formal word peace was used.
So war
But that applied to all the borders of Israel, not just to the Egyptian border. And this was our first contact with Egyptians. In '69, Nasser refused resuming diplomatic relations.
So war could not have been averted short of an Israeli agreement to full withdrawal from all fronts, no separate peace deal between Israel and Egypt.
That certainly was our perception.
Sorry.
And-
You want me, Dr. Kissinger, to repeat?
We're not going to be hearing his question, so if you could.
Yeah, could war have been averted by an agreement to withdraw to all the 67 borders? We had no way of knowing whether this was a genuine proposal. We had no indication that it was shared by Syria, and we were certain that Israel would not consider this under the circumstances that then existed with a Soviet deployment along the Suez Canal, an invasion of Syria by Syria, of Jordan just having been surmounted, So this was just a general proposition, which I attempted to turn into a counter-proposal of seeking a stage-by-stage approach, in the course of which the final withdrawal would still be open for discussion.
Did that have to do with the fact that only in late summer you personally became Secretary of State, and until Secretary
Had nothing to do with my personal position. The question of whether we delayed a peace proposal until I could personally take over foreign policy is absurd. Whenever Nixon wanted to act in a field, he would assign it to me, whatever the formal bureaucratic position was.
But the Israelis, especially Golda Meir, did not trust William Rogers, and she explicitly put the position that she trusts you, and the White House.
But that's not a rare Israeli position. That is something that has occurred in many administrations, and it had nothing to do with the decisions that Nixon made.
Going back to Sadat in 1973, he came out on several occasions in speeches and in an interview with Arno de Borgrav, perhaps also sent a message through de Borgrav to the administration that he's serious regarding his threat to go to war. Why did the administration, tend to dismiss him? And what was your impression of Sadat before you met him?
Did we dismiss Sadat's threats in 1973? And the implication, of course, of your question again is that it's somehow America's fault that the war occurred, because we had Sadat's threat available. Sadat had made many threats over an extended period of time. It was our judgment that he did not have the military capability to execute it. It was also the judgment of Israeli intelligence repeatedly given to us. And we had a firm plan to begin peace negotiations, which we conveyed through the National Security Advisor of Egypt, and which the Israelis were well aware of. So whether the timing of the peace initiative could have been advanced or not, that's one of these great questions journalists can ask 40 years later.
The surprise, the intelligence surprise that you, among others, mentioned, that nobody expected that on this particular day, the 6th of October, Yom Kippur, a concerted assault on two fronts would begin. You immediately asked to examine the intelligence, in addition to running whatever conduct of the war you had to. What is the general lesson for history of such intelligence failures and surprises?
Well, the question is whether in the light of all the conduct of our foreign policy, we then suddenly paid attention to the Israeli problem because I became Secretary of State. That's a basically insulting question. I was National Security Advisor. It was my responsibility. My responsibility had nothing to do with whether I was Secretary of State or not. It was my responsibility to put before the President the alternatives and the risks that he faced. In the week that we began to inquire into the tactical situation, It was caused by the fact that I received an intelligence report which spoke of concentrations of Egyptian and Syrian forces along the dividing lines. I received that both as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, since I held both jobs, and I would have received it whether I was whether I was Secretary of State or not. I then did what would have happened in any event. I asked the Central Intelligence Agency and the Israeli intelligence agencies what they thought of this report, and I asked them to repeat their assessment every 2 days, so that we could judge whether there was any imminent danger. And this was a procedure we would have followed in any event.
Now, my question didn't have anything to do with your jobs. I said that following the...
But you put it in terms of my jobs.
That following, I said that in addition to the great burden that you had in conducting day-to-day policy...
There would never... The question is whether in addition to my normal burdens as Secretary of State, I got additional burdens and therefore was more active than I would have been. There's never a possibility that the security of Israel would have been neglected under any contingencies, as we had proved in 1970 in the Jordan crisis and in the crisis along the Suez Canal.
Okay, I'm not trying to pursue this line, because all I had in mind was the post-mortem inquiry into the failure of intelligence, nothing to do with the fact that you had both jobs. I just mentioned that in addition to the burdens of day-to-day diplomacy, you had to inquire into the failures of intelligence, which was an internal American matter. But
the question is, did I inquire into the failures of intelligence? We had no reason to think there was a failure of intelligence. We received information that there were troop concentrations by Egypt along the Suez Canal and Syrian concentrations on the Golan Heights. So it was natural to inquire from the Central Intelligence Agency and from Mossad what their assessment of the situation was. Their initial assessment was that these were normal maneuvers and therefore did not represent an additional threat of war. I asked that these assessments be repeated, or that a new assessment be made every 2 days, in order to be sure that we were not surprised.
So finally, on Friday, both Israel and through General Scowcroft, your government was notified that war was apparently imminent. Nevertheless, they had to call in Ambassador Keating on Saturday morning in Israel, which was still midnight in New York, where you have been. Can you recall the time they woke you up in New York and alerted you?
No. The question is, at what point were we alerted to an imminent danger of war? On the Friday, which I guess is October 5th, we were informed of an increasing concern, but not of any specific new dangers, but of an increasing concern that these mobilizations, which we had noticed, might be something more serious. And we were asked to convey to the Arab side that Israel had no intention of launching a preemptive attack, and that therefore any military move that they might be contemplating should not be based on the fear of an Israeli attack. And this we did. I was notified at 6:30 Saturday morning, which was whatever time it was, 1 o'clock, Israel time, I was awakened by Assistant Secretary of State Sitko that a war was imminent. We were in New York for the General Assembly, and he woke me up and said, if I started acting immediately, I probably could still avert the outbreak.
And you called Foreign Minister Zayat and others, and
The question is, what did I do when I was notified? I have described all of this in detail with the actual phone conversations in a book. I called the Israeli ambassador and the Egyptian foreign minister. I couldn't reach anyone on the Syrian side, though I tried. And I called the Soviet ambassador. And obviously there were other phone calls, which you can find in the book.
Golda Meir, when she called Keating in, on her own volition, without being asked by the U.S. government, committed Israel to restrain itself and not to preempt. Was that a wise move on the part of the Israeli government?
The question is, was the Israeli decision taken on its own volition and not at our request not to preempt? Was that a wise decision? We're talking now about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Israeli time, and the attack was only a few hours away. So the first question is, how effective would a preemptive attack have been at that point on Yom Kippur without a mobilized Israeli Air Force and against the Soviet missile defense system along the canal, and which proved then later in the war fairly effective until the canal was crossed. So I can see that it was a reasonable judgment of Golda, balancing the risk she ran of looking like the aggressor against the real options she had and against the actual capabilities of Israel on Yom Kippur to launch a significant attack in the very limited time that was left.
For the first couple of days, everybody in Israel and presumably in Washington.
1 second, I need to just a little adjustment down this. Sorry.
For the first couple of days, October 6th, 7th, 8th, Israel time, which is also Egypt time and Syria time, everybody in Israel and presumably in Washington were still under the impression that the Israeli Defense Forces are repeating the performance of the Six-Day War. What was the reaction, your own and your colleagues, once it turned out that this was not the case?
The question is, what was our reaction when we realized that the repeated assurances and the common belief that Israeli military capabilities were intact from the 1967 experience. We did not become aware of it until Tuesday morning, I guess October 9th. Until then, we were told that the military operations were proceeding, that the Egyptian army would be destroyed, that the Israeli forces would push across the Suez Canal. And all our diplomacy was geared to that assumption. The first indication we had that things were different was when the military attaché, General Gur, and Dinitz called on me on Tuesday morning Dinitz having just returned urgently from Israel. They informed me that Israel had suffered very big losses on the Egyptian front, and that that Golda wanted to come to Washington to make a personal plea for help to the president. As it happened, Nixon was not available for the better part of the day because there was a state visit that was that required his attendance. I told the Israeli emissaries that I, of course, would inform the president immediately, and I did inform him immediately. But that my strong advice was not to have the Israeli prime minister leave Israel in the middle of a battle and come to America with a plea for help, since that would be construed by the other side as a sign of enormous weakness. Secondly, I promised him an answer on the military resupply by the evening of that day. By the evening of that day, I informed Dinitz that we committed ourselves to make up any losses that Israel suffered, and that therefore they could use as many of their reserves as their reserves, because we would fill up the supply system again. And we began moving, I believe it was 3 F-4s a day, to Israel immediately. We had already started giving as much technological equipment as could be transported by El Al from the evening of the second day of the war onward, namely October 7th. And then we turned to the question of resupply that evening and the next morning.
Tuesday, October the 9th, was probably the lowest point of despair in the Israeli leadership, as evidenced by this request by Golda to come to see Nixon. But in addition to that, there was talk of some other desperate moves or suggestions by the Israeli leadership, or some in the Israeli leadership, to take out their ultimate weapon, at least for show. Were you aware of such a signal?
Were there, did the Israelis on October 9th become so desperate that they threatened to employ or display ultimate weapons? If they did, it never came to my attention. And I never received, nor did Nixon receive, I don't suppose anyone in our government received any indication that this was being contemplated or that it was true. And we would have been very opposed to it. But that issue never arose. It was never discussed with us.
It would have been contrary to the tacit understanding, or perhaps even explicit, that Nixon and yourself reached with Golda Meir and Rabin in September of 1969, not to announce anything regarding this domain, because possession of such a weapon and displaying it were tantamount to provoking the Arabs. Wouldn't it have been contrary?
Well, would have such a display, such a threat, have been contrary to understandings Israel had with the United States? It would have, it certainly would have been contrary to what Israel understood our view to be on this matter. But the issue never arose. It was never discussed directly or indirectly.
By the way, that September 69 agreement is considered one of your own masterpieces of diplomacy in Israel, because it let Israel have what it wanted without bringing it to inspection and without talking about it too much. You agree? This is
Yeah.
this is not
I
a
won't
subject
come.
you want to go into.
I don't want to go into it.
Now, 3 days after October 9th, on October the 12th, Israel reversed course, and while the diplomacy that you mentioned was geared towards avoiding a ceasefire in place as long as the Egyptians were on the Israeli side of the canal, while the Israeli forces were not on the Egyptian side, and with fighting in Syria going on, all of a sudden you were asked to reverse course and to have a ceasefire immediately, if possible. Can you recount this turn of events?
Well, the question is whether on the morning of October 12th, Israel reversed itself and asked for a ceasefire, and what our reaction was. Our decision, which was made in the first hours of the war, was not to permit Israel to be defeated, and to do what was necessary to avoid this. We also felt that it was important not to end the war in conditions which created the impression of an Israeli defeat. We were determined to follow the war with a peace initiative, but it should not be based on Israeli weakness. So I thought it was unwise to make that offer, and I urged at a minimum an offensive on the Syrian front so that the situation could be restored on at least one front. And this became part of the strategy, and we then initiated in not excessively fast motion what Israel had requested of us. And we chose the route of having a third party propose it, so that it was not an Israeli request for an armistice. And we asked first Britain, and then later, when Britain refused, Australia, to make the proposal. But Sadat refused the proposal.
Why did Sadat at that moment, having achieved the limited success that he aimed at, why did he feel too complacent, too cocky to go on with the war when he could have had a certain victory?
Why did Sadat refuse the proposal when he had achieved already his objective of crossing the canal? I suppose because moderation in apparent victory is the hardest thing for a statesman. And he became overconfident, and he decided that the line he had reached, which was about 10 miles from the canal, he wanted to go to the passes. And so he launched an armored attack on Sunday morning, but by moving its armor beyond the protection of the Soviet missile defense, it became a target for the Israeli Air Force. And then the results of the battle of the previous week were reversed, and Egypt lost several hundred tanks on Sunday and Monday, which then in turn was the prelude to Sharon crossing the canal in the other direction.
And that was the moment when the Soviets intervened with...
I can only do about 10 more minutes.
Okay. With Kosygin going to Cairo, and then your own invitation to...
The question is, was at the moment that the Soviets intervened? My impression is that the Soviets didn't know what was going on, and that they believed the Egyptian claims of victory. If my recollection is correct, Sharon crossed the canal on Tuesday, and at any rate we became aware of it on Tuesday. I don't know when Kosygin went to Egypt. I think it was later. And the Soviets did not really intervene in a way that we were conscious of until Friday.
When you were called to Moscow, you were
It's
invited.
not so simple that the question is, and I was called to Moscow. There was a call, I suppose, for a negotiation with me. I gave them a deadline. I told them that I would not be ready to do that before Saturday night. And so the opportunity for developing the military situation still existed. And then I went to Moscow and arrived there at midnight on Saturday, or close to midnight on Saturday.
Was it difficult to conduct superpower diplomacy with Nixon sidelined to a great extent by Watergate and by his problems, and when you found out in Moscow that he authorized you, actually behind your back, to sign while you wanted to stall for time? But this is just a detail. How was it to conduct diplomacy on the highest level with such a domestic crisis going on in the United States with Watergate?
Was it difficult to conduct this diplomacy while Watergate was coming to its high point? Because there was because of the publication of the transcripts. The basic difficulty during all of Watergate was how to preserve American credibility when executive authority was under unremitting assault. But we were helped by the fact that the Soviet leaders could not imagine the decline of authority within the system that was really going on. Now, while I was on the way to Moscow, Nixon sent a message to Brezhnev giving me full authority to settle all issues. He might not have done that in normal circumstances, but he was under enormous pressure to demonstrate his active conduct of the diplomacy, very understandably. And one has to give Nixon enormous credit for the fortitude he displayed during all phases of that crisis. As the record shows, it was one of the perhaps few occasions when I resisted being given additional authority and called Washington to complain about it.
Now, if we have only a few moments more, I'll concentrate on the big themes. The superpower confrontation of October 25th with DEFCON 3 and the fears of a clash regarding the Third Army, or perhaps in the Mediterranean, on a scale when the Cuban Missile Crisis is considered the most dangerous period of the Cold War, and other crises coming on. Where do you place this particular alert?
The question concerns the decisions on October 25th, which placed some American forces on alert, and to judge where this rated in compared to the other crises of the Cold War, and especially the question of DEFCON 3, Let me first explain what is meant by DEFCON 3. The American military forces at that time had 5 stages of alert, one being imminent war, and then they went down in gradation. Many forces were on DEFCON 4. Nuclear forces were generally on DEFCON 2. So the talk of nuclear alert is something that journalists use. There was next to no nuclear alert. It was not in our interest to create the danger of an imminent nuclear war. What was in our interest was the following. We received a message from Brezhnev, which we interpreted as a threat that if we did not jointly operate against the Israeli encirclement of the Third Egyptian Army, that the Soviet Union might be prepared to act alone. That threat was reinforced by the fact that 10 of the 12 paratroop or airborne divisions of the Soviet Union had stood down, which was a signal of preparation. And that some things had happened in the nuclear field that made us concerned. So in sending a reply rejecting this proposal, we wanted to make clear that were the Soviet Union to act alone, we would resist. And this at a time at the high point of Watergate. In order to send this warning, we took some alert measures which we knew and which were designed to generate a lot of cable traffic and a lot of activity, such as alerting the 82nd Airborne Division, such as calling personnel of the 6th Fleet back to their ships. So the idea that we were approaching nuclear war, it's the opposite of what we intended to do. We wanted to make clear that if there were a Soviet move, we would resist it locally. There were some minor nuclear dispositions, but they had next to nothing to do. Now, how does that compare with the Cuban Missile Crisis? Both of them were caused by Soviet actions in which the Soviets did not understand the consequences of their decisions. In the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was a more direct nuclear confrontation. In the Middle East crisis, there was a more direct conventional confrontation. And had the Soviets acted as we thought they might, the time span in which we would have had to react was relatively short. But I'd rate it perhaps a shade below the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Now, bearing in mind that a few months after the war ended on the Egyptian front, you had the separation of forces, which was the first agreement in a long line leading to the peace treaty, and that you managed to get Egypt out of the Soviet orbit and into your own moderate, pragmatic camp, but with Israel losing 2,600 men killed and many other wounded, taken prisoner. Who won the war?
The question is, who won the war? It was not like 1967. There was no clear-cut victory in that sense. Israel demonstrated that it could not be defeated by Arab forces with Soviet backing because it would continue to have American backing, and because its own forces, once they had recovered from the surprise, operated effectively and with great daring. But Israel learned a lesson that was new in its experience, namely that its capacity for suffering was limited by the size of its population, so that 2,600 dead represented a huge blow to Israel. And in any case, the Israeli attitude toward human life created a great vulnerability with respect to prisoners, so that the adversaries knew they would always touch a very sore point. So that was an Israeli liability. But if one compares where Israel was, say, in 1969, to where it was 40 years later, its position had improved. It was a much more fully accepted member of the international community. It was part of a peace process. Some of the Arab participants of that war were part of the peace process, and it has proved to be one of the stabilizing elements. But it was a painful experience, and it showed the tragedies and complexities of Israel's existence.
What lessons should current leaders, current leadership groups take when they are facing today's crisis? Presumably they will still be here a year from now when we broadcast. But when current leaders look at today's crisis, Iran or other crisis, what lessons in leadership could they take from you, from Sadat, from Golda?
Now, what lessons can one learn from that crisis? Well, one should understand that whatever one has to do ultimately, one should do when one still has a margin of decision. And one should have clear, long-range objectives. But again, I want to say it's a problem when you have a country with a very narrow margin of survival. There are some experiments you cannot try. I better end it. I've got to go.
Okay, thank
Can we just one last question? One last
you.
question.
לגבי מצרים.
No, look, I've got to go.
עזוב אותנו.
What's the question?
The question was regarding the objectives vis-à-vis Egypt, winning them from the Soviet dependency on the Soviet Union, and having them moved from the time of Nasser, when they were so anti-American, to where they became your main proponent in the region. If you could.
And what's the question?
And the question is, was that an achievement you aimed at, or was that a consequence of the war?
The question is, was moving Egypt from the Soviet camp to the American camp a design of American policy? No, it was a design of American policy from 1969 on. When I actually said at a press conference, we will try to expel the Soviets from Egypt, to create a sense of frustration among the Arabs with Soviet help, so that some Arab country, hopefully Egypt, but we did not specify which country, would decide to move towards the United States. And our basic message to the Arabs during the war was, you're making war with Soviet arms, but you will have to make peace with American diplomacy. And please keep that in mind.
Thank you very much, sir. Always illuminating and enlightening, and it will remain so in the documentary, as you will be
Well,
able.
if you will do that. I'm just very
Tizar al Arosh.
sensitive to. I mean,
You
I
had that
knew all these people. I knew Rabin and Golda. They had a horrible task, and it's easy years later to beat up on them
That's not our intention.
and
Tom.
say they might have done it better.
Well, the question we
I mean,
got.
But you take 70 or 60 peace negotiations, everyone. It's easy for people to say, if you go back to the 67 borders and then have a country which is 8 miles wide, we will give you some unspecified peace when one of the parties isn't even speaking to Americans, and the other one, for all we knew, was a character out of Aida. I mean, who knew anything about Sadat? When Sadat became president, our estimate was that he couldn't last for a year. That I forget who the other one was.
Ali Sabri. Ali Sabri.
Yeah, who would replace him? So one has to put that into the context that nobody took Sadat very seriously.
Very well, sir. It's really illuminating.
Pleasure.
Nice to see you.
And an exceptional experience. Thank you.
I know you talk to Scowcroft. He's less passionate than I am.
Well, he was passionate about
He
you.
was very passionate.
And
Exactly.
I think it was.
No, but we were a good team.
Yes, you were. And again, I don't know why. Well, I understand from your experience with previous interviewers and documentaries or whoever.
I've seen outrageous things.
But I have gone over the declassified documents and most of the records, and I have nothing but admiration to the way you personally and your team, Scowcroft included, conducted diplomacy under such terrible circumstances,
Yeah.
with Watergate and everything. It's really one of the highlights of the 20th century. When one looks at all of the crises you had, and juggling so many problems in
But
there.
that's not for me to say.
Okay,
I mean,
we'll
it's,
say it. Can
we say
may
Of
I
course
say
you
it?
can say it, but
But
no, it was tough.
and we know that I've been through that period. We know that you were unjustly vilified by some of the sectors in the Israeli public when you shuttled, which you had done only to save Israel.
That was my view.
And I think the view in Israel in general has shifted enormously. People know that your contribution was enormous.
Well, when I was in Israel last time, somebody came down from Tiberias who had been a prisoner of the Syrians, and he took the long trip just to thank me for 5 minutes.
Really, a pilot probably, or
A pilot, yes.
interesting. And this is what you meant by Assad refusing to give even the list of prisoners until he got Quneitra. The vulnerability of the Israeli public. Be careful.
But he gave us the list
Yes, but he
before
got.
the negotiation. No,
Yes, but you promised not to reveal it to Golda.
yeah, but I did then anyway.